as an indie author. You get roughly 70 cents on the dollar versus 10 to 15 cents on the dollar if you're with a traditional publisher. I had been told you can't make a living as an author. I had to get a day job, so I ended up working in the finance world. I did that for 23 years, but even then I would come home and I would write and just write and write. I never gave up on it.
You often blend genres like suspense, horror, sci-fi, crime, the supernatural, and sometimes all in one story. So what does this thinking differently truly look like in modern storytelling?
The first thing they want to do is put you in a box. They want to be able to label you as a thriller author, a romance author, a sci-fi author.
And what is the biggest creative compromise authors face when adapting books for film?
Once you sign a contract with a film or television studio and other people are involved, it's no longer your book. So the reason the Fourth Monkey sold as well as it did, it's a serial killer novel, but my serial killer dies at the very beginning of the book, which hasn't happened before. So in this particular story, a killer's been operating in Chicago.
As you said, like your books have been translated into dozens of languages and sold in 150 plus countries. So now talk to us about what is the number one mistake authors make when trying to build a global brand. How do you see artificial intelligence shaping the future of publishing, and what should authors do so the technology enhances rather than replaces this creativity?
But the truth is that AI can't write a book, not yet. It's not capable of a creative thought. I've got no doubt that sooner or later it will be, and that it probably will be sooner rather than later.
So folks, we are joined by J.D. Barker. He's a New York Times and international best-selling author known for genre-bending thrillers that fuse horror, crime, sci-fi, mystery, and the supernatural. His breakout novel, Forsaken, earned a Bram Stoker Award nomination, and Dracul, co-authored using Bram Stoker's original notes, is in development at Paramount. He frequently collaborates with James Patterson and released his solo novel, Something I Keep Upstairs, in 2025. And we are really super thrilled to have JD as part of our conversation today. And JD, hearty welcome to the Guiding Voice podcast series. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure to host you. And folks, today we are going to dive into an interesting conversation on the topic at hand. Inside the mind of a master story maker, J.D. Barker, on fear, fiction, and the future of publishing. But before we get started with the mainstream conversation, here is an exciting twist. Let us tickle our guest brain first. So, J.D., get ready for a first rapid fire round, which is a rapid fire round of random words. I'm going to mention a few words and request you to share the first thing that comes to your mind in response without thinking much. And if you're ready, let's get started.
Okay, bring it on.
Okay, my first word is curiosity.
Curiosity solved.
Invention.
Invention. Light bulb.
Future.
Past.
Universe.
Microscopic.
Leadership.
Solo.
Got it. Success.
Dreams.
Aliens.
Absolutely.
Books.
Escape.
Story.
Same.
And the last one is role model.
That's tough. I probably have to say James Patterson at this point.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much for participating in first rapid fire round, and also thank you so much for being part of our journey in shaping the careers and lives of millions across the globe. And with that, let's get into the mainstream. So my podcast name is The Guiding Voice, and this is a standard question which I ask all my guests. So JD, talk to us about who is your guiding voice?
Honestly, it's always been myself. I seek the advice of a lot of different people, but ultimately, I'm the decision maker when it comes to all this stuff. So, I guess it would be me. The buck stops here.
Wonderful. And talk to us about your success mantra, as in top three things that have contributed to your success so far.
I think perseverance is probably the number one. I've been working as an author my entire life. I had been told you can't make a living as an author. You have to get. I had to get a day job, so I ended up working in the finance world. I did that for 23 years, but even then, I would come home and I would write, and just write and write. I never gave up on it.
Hmm. Hmm. Wonderful. And talking about your debut novel, Forsaken, right? It wasn't just a hit, it was partly inspired by real supernatural investigations from your early career. So, how did those experiences shape the type of storyteller you became?
I personally love reading a book that takes facts and mixes them in with the fiction to the point where you can't tell the difference. So I've been doing that with a couple of my different books. The Forsaken, it relies heavily on the Salem witch trials and those events from the past. And a lot of those. It's funny because when you read it, a lot of the stuff that reads like it should be fiction, the scariest, creepiest, most strange things turn out to be the true stuff.
Hmm. Got it. And also, you have succeeded in both indie as well as traditional publishing. So, what bold experiments should new authors try today in order to thrive in a hybrid model?
Yes, I sort of fell into both. I when I initially published Forsaken, I had no idea how to query an agent, so
Hmm.
I didn't get one. But I knew I had a good book. I had worked in behind the scenes in publishing for 20 some years, so I knew what it took to sell a good book. I knew I had a 5-star read. So ultimately, I decided to put that out on my own, but I mimicked everything that I saw coming out of the big publishers. I use Penguin Random House as an example. So I hired the best cover designers, the best editors, best format people. I wanted to put out a product that was indistinguishable from the products coming from them. And ultimately, that's what I did. And for a lot of reasons, that book sold really well. And that was probably just one of many. And that put me on the radar of the traditional publishers. So at that point, I had no trouble getting an agent, no trouble getting a publishing deal. My next couple of books, I did the traditional route with Random House, with HarperCollins, with Putnam. But I had gotten a taste of being an indie author. The financial benefits are much better. You
Hmm.
get roughly 70 cents on the dollar versus 10 to 15 cents on the dollar if you're with a traditional publisher. They give you a nice big check at the beginning, which is great, but you have to pay that money back and you're paying it back in these small little increments. So when you look back on something, like I'm fortunate enough now, I've been at it for 11 years. I can look back at an indie published title and the economics of that versus a traditionally published title and the economics of that. Over the long run, I'm better off as an indie author. But
Hmm.
I'm constantly experimenting with that. I did a couple of books that I did the hybrid model, which you kind of touched on. So I published them domestically in English, through my own publishing company. And then I had the typical publishers put me, get the book out around the world in all the different languages. And I'm in about 150 different countries, 24 different
Oh.
languages. So there's a lot of people involved, but I did that model for a little bit. But there's, as an indie author, there's some places you just can't get into. It's near impossible to get into the big box stores. It's hard to get into grocery stores, drugstores, things like that. Ultimately, about a year and a half ago, I worked out a deal with Simon and Schuster, where they allowed me to create my own imprint on Simon and Schuster. So I get to act as an indie author. I can put out whatever books I want when I want. But Simon and Schuster handles my print sales and distribution, which personally, in today's world, I think that's the best position I can be in. That may change a year from now. Publishing moves very quickly, but I'm very happy with it right now.
Hmm. Yeah, got it. And as you said, like your books have been translated into dozens of languages and sold in 150 plus countries. So now talk to us about what is the number one mistake authors make when trying to build a global brand.
I think a lot of people rush into it. They
Mhm.
start and they spread themselves too thin. I think you need to get to the point where you're comfortable in one market, you're doing well in that one market, then you can take that into another territory. And you have to look at them like that as different territories, different. You're basically you're selling a product, you're selling a widget. Look at wherever your prominent market is. Why is it selling well there? Why? What is working, what's not working. What can you carry over and control that expansion slowly. Because if you try to expand too fast, you just hire translators, you do this, you do that. You're spreading yourself too thin. It's going to be near
Mhm.
impossible to stay on top of it. You're not going to be able to tell what's working and what's not.
Wonderful. That's a great input. In fact, I have recently published my third book. This is the one, 69 Naked Truths, Uncomfortable Wisdom for Uncommon Growth. And right now I'm about to publish in Indian languages, and I thought I would go with my mother tongue, and I have hired one translator. But definitely your inputs are going to help because I'm trying to translate into at least a few more Indian languages. So thanks for sharing that. And JD,
Well,
you often blend genres like suspense, horror, sci-fi, crime, the supernatural, and sometimes all in one story. So, what does this thinking differently truly look like in modern storytelling?
Well, that's something I got a lot of pushback at the very beginning, because when
Hmm.
you do get an agent, when you get a publisher, the first thing they want to do is put you in a box. They want to be able to label you as a thriller author, a romance author, a sci-fi author, which is important to them because they need to be able to tell the marketing people how to market you. Those people need to tell the bookstores where to put you in the store. From that standpoint, it all makes a lot of sense. But I didn't want to get pigeonholed. I didn't want to be stuck doing one particular thing. So I purposely came out of the gate. I wrote a horror novel first, then I wrote a thriller novel, then I wrote another horror novel, then I wrote another thriller. I bounced back and forth. And I got about 4 or 5 books in. My editor called me one day and we were discussing demographics. And he said, "It looks like your primary audience is women 45 and over. So that's who you should have to target." So
Hmm.
I wrote a young adult book. I decided I'm not going to target the group that I already got. I already have those readers. So I
Hmm.
wanted to use, I've kind of used the books themselves as, almost like a literary Pied Piper. I look for places where I'm not selling books, then I write something that fits that particular market, and then I bring them into the fold, and that expands my audience. And it's not something I invented. I studied a lot of the big name authors, people that have been around for a very long time. And if you look at somebody like Stephen King, you walk into a bookstore, you see his name prominently displayed on the book. The title is much smaller and people
Yeah.
are buying it. They don't necessarily know what the story is about. They don't care what it's about. It's about that voice. It's about the
Mhm.
brand. So I've been basically following that particular model, building the brand before, getting locked down to a particular voice. I don't want to be pigeonholed.
Mhm. Yeah, got it. And also, you collaborate frequently with James Patterson. And what do most people misunderstand about the business and creativity behind co-authoring?
I think, well, in Patterson's case, I think a lot of people don't believe he's actually writing the books, which I can tell you is totally false. He is all over every one of these books. I have no
Mhm.
idea where he finds the time or the bandwidth to do it, but he does, and I've seen him do it. I've written with a lot of people. I mean, I mentioned that I worked, behind the scenes 20 some years, while I
Wow.
was in the finance world. Um, while I was doing that, I was basically working as a book doctor and a ghostwriter. So that entire time, I was working with other people on projects. I was taking books that needed work and I was rewriting them. I wrote a lot of memoirs for other people. I ghost wrote a lot of titles, but all of those projects were collaborative. I was working with other people. So when I sat down to write Forsaken, that was actually the first time I wrote a book all by myself, and that felt weird to me. Mainly because I had been used to working with others. So I think the number one thing you need to consider when you actually do work with another person, you have to figure out what everybody's skill set is. It's almost like having two people in the kitchen trying to make breakfast at the same time. If you both try to make eggs, you're going to trip over each other. But if one person makes bacon while the other person makes eggs, then everything works out. So sit down with your co-author, figure out who's good at what, divide and conquer, and you're going to get to the finish line.
All right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Actually, I think we may have to complement the skills. That is one of the key things, right? All
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
And yeah, and moving to the next one, Dracul is in development at Paramount and being directed by Andrew Muschietti. And what is the biggest creative compromise authors face when adapting books for film?
Well, I think you need to understand, like, once you sign a contract with a film or television studio and other people are involved, it's no longer your book. The only
Mhm,
thing that is really yours truly as an author is that first written copy, the actual printed text. That's your words. Nobody can take that away from you. But like even when they do an audiobook, now all of a sudden you've got the narrator's take on your words. So it's already different. So you need to be willing to take a step back and let people do what they need to do. It's virtually impossible, I think, to make a movie or TV show that mimics a book 100%. And frankly, I wouldn't want that to happen. As a fan, when I go to a movie based on a book, I want to see something different. I want to get surprised.
mhm,
And as an author, it's no different. But I can tell you, I've got a lot of projects now in what I call various stages of Hollywood hell. No two of them have come together the same way. And when I initially started getting phone calls from the film side, they were a little bit scary because they told me like everything that they had to take out of the story in order to get it down to 2 hours. So all of a sudden this character has to go. These two people have to be combined. This storyline needs to disappear. So it becomes another story whether you want it to be or not. And that was about 11, 12 years ago with Fourth Monkey when that first happened. In today's world, streaming is very popular. Series is very popular. And what I'm finding is when they take a book and they adapt it for a series, you've got 8 to 10 episodes now per book. They can tell the whole story, and not only can
mhm,
they tell the whole story, but they look for material that didn't make it into the book. They want to know what you have on your cutting room floor that they can add. So I'm a big fan as an author of streaming stuff of 8 to 10 episodes for a title. It lets you tell the story you really want to tell.
mhm, mhm. Interesting. And when it comes to the way you work, like you have global book sales to film options to cross industry collaborations. So I'm curious to understand, like, how do you decide which opportunities move your author business forward?
I have to take a step back and put my business hat on. That's really what
Hmm.
it comes down to. A lot of times
Hmm.
there's a particular story I want to write next, but if that doesn't fit what my, business as a whole needs to come out next, then a lot of times it's going to get put aside and I'm going to write what I need to write. No different than, any other business deciding how they want to expand. You have to be able to do that, I think. At the same time, you have to be passionate about everything that you write. I've got a fairly long list of ideas for different books. So when it comes time for me to fill that pipeline, I sit down with everybody that's involved, all the different people that work for me, my agents, my editors, and we decide as a group, what is the next best thing. And and you have to consider it's not going to hit for a year and a half. So you kind of have to put your futurist hat on, break your crystal ball out to try and figure out what comes next.
Hmm. Got it. And talking about behind the scenes experience, like you worked as a ghostwriter and book doctor before becoming a bestseller. So, what entrepreneurial lessons did those behind the scenes years teach you?
Well, honestly, they're very lucrative. I think a lot of people don't consider that. My very first ghost written project that I did, I was
Hmm.
at Miami Dolphins football game. And I was down on the field. I had gotten tickets through a friend of mine, and we were actually down there with the players. I walked up to a very famous player, and we were talking while we were on the sidelines. And I asked him if he ever considered writing a book about his life. And he said, I get that question all the time, but I'm not a writer. I don't have the time to do it. So we exchanged phone numbers, and Alton, we came to an understanding. His agent ended up selling the memoir, his book, and I would write it, and we ended up splitting everything 50-50. So it was extremely lucrative. I did a lot of memoirs for politicians, for sports figures, for actors and actresses. And not
Hmm.
only did it help pay the bills, but I think it really helped me learn how to write characters because when you have to write a book from first person point of view, from like in my case, a female, like
Hmm.
that's a difficult thing to do. But when you do it over and over again for all these different people, that allows you to create characters. You learn to differentiate those voices. So it's a skill set. Like I don't think I'd be doing what I do today without that in my past.
Hmm. No, interesting. And how do you see artificial intelligence shaping the future of publishing, and what should authors do so the technology enhances rather than replaces this creativity?
You cut out again. Are you referring to AI?
Yes, that's right. That's right. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously everywhere. And I've tried all the different models because I want to stay on top of it. But the truth is that AI can't write a book, not yet. It's not capable of a creative thought. I've got no doubt that sooner or later it will be, and that it probably will be sooner rather than later. But even if that happens, I mean, if you think about it, like we all get emails today that are written by ChatGPT. So you start reading that email, you know immediately this was written by ChatGPT and not by a person.
Yeah.
It's because ChatGPT has a particular voice. So I
Yeah.
think even when these AIs get to the point where they're writing novels, they're going to have a voice that we recognize, and that voice is going to be different than my voice. It's going to be different than every other author out there. So what you have to do as an author is just double down on your own voice, your own brand, your own product, and
Mhm.
I think you'll be just fine. I don't think any of us actually have to worry about it.
Yeah. Got it. And JD, this has been an incredible conversation so far with tons of insights and takeaways. And it's time for us to add some more spice to the episode, which means it brings us to the second rapid fire round. And if you are ready, let's get the ball rolling.
All right, let's go.
Okay, here comes the first bullet. If you could have one gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, what would it say?
Oh, it would probably be in Times Square in New York, and it would have the cover for my next book.
Spot on. And can you describe yourself in just one word?
Um, Assertive.
Assertive. A book you wish you had written.
Great expectations.
Hmm. And one supernatural creature you would never want to meet.
After all the research I've done and reading Bram Stoker's notes, definitely a vampire.
Vampire. Okay. And the strangest fan request you have ever received.
I surprisingly get a lot of emails from people that want me to kill them in a book.
Interesting. And one word that defines your writing style.
Inventive.
And then the author whose advice you never ignore.
At this point, I work so much with James Patterson, I can't ignore him. He's got me on speed dial,
Right.
but he's always right. So he is
Mhm.
worth listening to.
Yeah, fair enough. And then here comes the last one for the second rapid fire. What is one electronic gadget or a fantasy gadget that you like to see or invent yourself?
I'm still waiting for a foldable iPhone, so I'm hoping we see that this year.
Yeah, I think that might hit the market soon. And yeah, after that amazing second rapid fire, let's flip back to the mainstream. So the fourth monkey, right, sold in preempts and auctions worldwide. So what strategic moves can emerging authors make to attract top tier agents and also international publishers?
Well, I think you need to come up with something that hasn't been done before. So the reason The Fourth Monkey sold as well as it did, it's a serial killer novel, but my serial killer dies at the very beginning of the book, which hasn't happened before. So in this particular story, a killer's been operating in Chicago for 5 years. Every time he kidnaps a victim, he sends a box to the family, a little white box tied off with a black string. And the first one's got an ear in it. And like he's repeated this pattern over and over again. The police know it. The press know it. So at the beginning of my novel, I've got a guy who gets hit by a city bus on his way to the mailbox, about to mail a box that basically contains a human ear. So the police know that their killer is dead, but they also know that he just kidnapped somebody else, and that person is out there somewhere. They've got no idea who that person is or where they are. So I basically took the model and twisted it on its head. I do that all the time. So my latest book, something I keep upstairs, I knew I wanted to write a haunted house story, but I didn't want to write the same haunted house story we've heard a million times. Husband and wife
Mhm.
buy a house, they move in, something weird happens, something weirder happens, they find out something really bad happened, and then they solve it all and everybody goes home. I didn't want to write that story. So the tagline for this book is, for a haunted house to be born, somebody has to die. So
Mhm.
it's all about a kid. He's 17 years old. He inherits a house from his grandmother, perfectly ordinary house, and him and his friends decide they want to turn it into a haunted house. They start exactly where you would expect. There's a couple of scary stories, there's a Ouija board, but you know the tagline for the book: for a haunted house to be born, somebody has to die. So you know where they're going, and that's what makes it fun to read.
Wonderful. And what can these emerging authors make to attract top tier agents and international publishers? What's your advice to them?
I I
Yeah.
think all you can do is be the best author that you could possibly be. I wouldn't share any of your work until you feel it's at, its best possible level.
Hmm.
At this point, like, agents can't take on a project, editors can't take on a project. They need a book to be as close to perfect as possible before it lands on their desk. So as an author, you need to keep that in mind. You need to write the best possible book you can. You've got to hire the best possible people around you to help fine tune it, make it better. You need to hand them a finished product. If you can do that, the book will sell.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me today. And how is your experience being hosted on The Guiding Voice?
Oh, it was fun. I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure to host you. And I wish you all the best on your new books. And looking forward to hosting you again in future. Thank you once again. It was pleasure hosting
Yeah,
you.
you as well. Good luck with the book.
Thank you so much. All right, so friends, that was our episode with JD Barker. Before we jump into the fun trivia section, we have a quick request. If you have enjoyed the conversation and found it useful, request you to share with at least 3 of your friends or colleagues or family members, whoever you think are going to like The Guiding Voice. So spread the knowledge and help others grow just like you. And now it's time for us to cruise into the trivia segment. So today's trivia is about horror, publishing, and storytelling. And I wanted to share you few facts. The first fact is, do you know Dracula's original title? Which means I'm not referring to Dracul, but the Dracula, Dracula's original title. B- Bram Stoker's first working title for Dracula was The Undead. And second fact I wanted to share with you is books versus film adaptations. Roughly 50 to 70% of best-selling thrillers optioned for film never make it past early development. And Hollywood calls this as development hell. Third fact is around hybrid publishing growth. Hybrid publishing has grown significantly in the last decade as authors seek greater control and faster time to market. And the next fact is the psychology of fear. Studies show that reading horror activates similar neural circuits to actual fear, yet in a controlled environment that the brain perceives as safe. And the last one is about the global thriller market. Thriller and crime fiction are consistently the world's highest selling genres, often surpassing romance in several regions. So this is all I wanted to share from trivia perspective. Likewise, if you have any interesting trivia facts about publishing, horror, sci-fi, or anything related to the books, June, feel free to comment. If you're watching this on YouTube or if you found it on Spotify or any other social media platforms, you can comment there as well. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in and also for being part of our awesome TGV family. So until next time, take care, stay inspired, and remember, the best is yet to come. Goodbye for now. See you in the next episode with another amazing guest. Take care. Love you all. Bye bye.